Well, could burn a fire with our coal. We did yesterday. Today, well, looking back, the face told us things that we can do with lapis. And we can burn lapis and perhaps do things with time. We don't have lapis, but we do have sulphur. Let's burn some sulphur. Oh, what a horrible smell. I need to get out of here. And the shade is off. I have, as you can see, no arrow for moving the shade. What a great way to start your day, to wake up to the smell of sulphur. Naturally, the shade is just going to get as far away from it as he can. I suppose it's fortunate that the king doesn't mind. That would have made for an interesting ending. Yesterday we spent some time reading Zarathustra. And when I'm away from the game, I think about that. I think about some of the things he writes and stuff. And this time I was wondering, the shade. He doesn't need to eat, but what we saw in one of the endings, when he had tea in front of him, he was eating it. Well, however it is that you call it, what you do to tea. Probably not eating, but he was doing that. And there was cake in front of him. You can assume he ate some of that eventually. But sleeping. Also, our shade doesn't need to sleep, but given the opportunity, he does. Perhaps if he's just bored, he'll lay down and sleep, have a dream, or from eating mushrooms, or laying in a bed. But is this not what Zarathustra wants? A Superman? I could imagine that would be a delightful evolution. I think a lot of people would enjoy not having the need to eat, not having to have to sleep. You could if you want to, but you're not required to anymore. If that were the case, you really wouldn't need a home. You can just travel for as long as you wanted. I'm sure your body would still get tired in some way. I don't know. Does the shade get tired? He doesn't seem to be in a rush to do anything, so he's kind of like a bit like a sloth. The way he goes about things, even with the horrible sulphur smell that he can't bear to be anything near, just wants to get away from. He's in no rush. It would be tragic, our shade being like coal, if he were to be stuck in a place with fire. But the Superman, that was the point. Is the shade Superman? Not to worry. We did this for a reason. And we had put it off for the very same reason. You might ask, what if these doors were closed? What would happen? What would the shade do then? Well, for one, you couldn't get sulphur unless you were beyond these doors. But what about the next place, the next position where we had to do something that would prevent the shade from going further? What would happen? The shade would stop. However, given our situation where we know we can walk to the surface, where will the shade go? I think if I were the shade, and I didn't have to sleep, but perhaps I wanted to, it would probably be like a cat and find a interesting little corner of a cave to curl up in. There was a place we had just passed. Under the stairs, it seemed like a nice little groove. On stream, we once talked about a woman who voluntarily lived in a cave for a couple of years. I wonder if she did that. I wonder if she found interesting places to sleep. Or did she prefer something familiar? Some sort of camp that she always just returned to. Granted, if it's completely dark and you can't see anything, would it really matter? To me, it would. Hey, little spider bro. He doesn't seem to be affected by the sulphur. Either that, or the spider just doesn't know what it is. Hey, it smells funny. What can we do about it? That's it. is that nothing is going to stop the shade. And that there is perhaps no limit for him wanting to get away from the smell. One time when I was playing, the shade went very far, a bit further than we are now. And then he met his angst. Was it his angst? I think it was perhaps just the wall there, that I hadn't figured out how to create a mushroom. And he stopped. And then I decided, well, that was a bad idea. I'm going to return home. So I took another 20-minute walk to return back home, and immediately upon returning to the house, the sulphur was still burning, and the shade remarked, "Ah, it stinks, I need to get away from here." And he began his walk back up to the very same wall that stopped him. Yeah, at that point, I just let the shade stay there for the rest of the day. I had to make sure the sulphur was out. I think it only burns for maybe half an hour, maybe an hour. It's not too long, but it's long enough that you can reach a dead end, come back, and start your journey back to that dead end. You might have noticed when the shade left, when there were two branching paths to go, the shade actually made the effort to climb the shorter side of the stairs, climbing, which is something he normally doesn't do. And just there, completely invisible to us, the shade knows there's a stairway there. Which, as a casual player, if you didn't know it was there, perhaps the sulphur was a bit of a use here to take you in a direction that you may have never known existed. Actually, I wonder if that would happen. If your angst was here, and you met with your angst, it would instantly return you home. And you would come to, wake up, I had a horrible nightmare. The smell, and immediately leave. Now that we're on this walk, I want to remind us of a book we had read. The book was called The Secret Garden, and at the end of that book, Shade made a comment. A comment about, I wish I can find someplace secret. Perhaps if I can't remember the wording exactly, but it was something to the effect of, perhaps if I pay attention to the sound of my footsteps. And at the time, when we read it, it wasn't relevant to us. You hear it, don't you? It's there, without the clue. The very first time we walk through here, you can hear it. And you can see our shade is walking in a different direction. Oh, there's a fork in the road. It seems to be an alternative way to the top. And that, in the nutshell, is the main purpose of the sulphur. Mostly it'll bring you to dead ends, but if the dead ends are clear, it'll guide you to places that perhaps you've never seen before. You can imagine having an experience like mine. The first time you use the sulphur, you'll tend to not want to use it again. I still have no control over the shade. Light. I can finally breathe freely again. What is this? Another living being? It seems to be sleeping. And there is another mattock for our collection. A handy mattock, useful for harvesting minerals and for breaking through fragile walls. Oh, maybe it was his biggest dream to be a unicorn one day. It didn't work. This is a fun comment because when we first ran into the stalactite and the one after it had fallen, when we crossed it for the first time, the shade remarked that that would be frightening to, I should be careful because perhaps one can fall on me. Now that he sees it, this is all he has to say about it. Maybe it was his biggest dream to be a unicorn one day. Huh. But this does kind of go back to our theory of the little mattock being something used by someone our sized. Well, here's someone. This is the first time we've ever seen such a thing in the caves. And this looks like a cave that we could explore. It's not. It's not explorable. Or it's rather just a very shallow cave. Looked like they were walking this way. Perhaps stopped, looked up, and then... doom. It seems strange to be poked perfectly in the eye. Perhaps they heard it. It was maybe cracking, and they looked up. What's that sound? I picture this to be a spiral staircase. Something feels odd about this cave. I like that. The shade doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know that he is so close to the surface. It's boarded up. You belong here, little book. I'll take you to a safe place. Does this book contain the clue I need? This will be fun to read for sure. This book will keep me company at home. Welcome, friend. This one is called Never-Ending Notebook. Wonder what that means. As the former owner of this book can't make use of it anymore, I feel no guilt taking it with me. If we had picked up the books from right to left rather than left to right, it doesn't matter. Once you reach that specific number, that's the eternal notebook. Strange book. So whoever that figure was, they've been reading. They had their own little collection of books, and they have a bunch of, well, they had a bunch of birds. Don't know what's up in the upper corner there. Doesn't quite look like birds. This one does. A weird cave indeed. Singing crystal. I did see we can pick it up. Pick it up later. There's no way out. Whoever lived here made sure of that. Historic. Just making a nest up there, it seems. I don't like storks. Well, that's a weird thing to say. The shade has never seen the stork, as far as we know. He's only been alive for 150-ish days. Where does that come from? And yeah, this odd contraption, I had no idea what the heck it was when I first saw it. Apparently it's used to grind up bones, turn them into bone meal. And it's like, bone meal? Isn't that... Oh, look there in the background. Far in the background, do you see it? Right, so bone meal. I didn't know anything about the stuff. Apparently it's not something you only find in Minecraft, that people actually use bone meal for like a fertilizer, and it helps plants to grow. Oh, that's cool, except what plants in this world, in this place where we are there's no way out of here. We wouldn't use it, we wouldn't feed it to birds. This person, whoever they are, capturing birds, taking the birds and turning them into bone meal, perhaps? I don't know for sure. I don't know if he was taking birds and just killing them, because it looked like some of them were pets. You know, they were forgotten. They're bones now because they've probably been neglected for quite a long time. There's a nest here even for a stork. So whoever lived here, I assume that they liked birds. But then when the birds pass, they make the most of everything out of the bird. That was a weird little pause. But making bone meal, I have no idea what they will be making bone meal for, because as far as we know, there's no way out of here. It's, in some ways, the Shade calls it a cave. To me, it's like an extension of the cave. It just extends outside. They also have a mattock, or they had a mattock, it's ours now. So they were used to digging around in the caves. Some people in the community, they like to refer to that skeleton as a wizard. Not sure why. Pointy little house, he had some books. That's no really different than us, or the other figure who lives off in the other direction, the old man, who I say was perhaps a Shade before. Just because it's a tower doesn't mean he's a wizard. He's... oh. Did you? Did you hear the little laugh? Oh. a mysterious key. What might it open? So, that's the stork that lives here and has another nest on the other home, the one I've mentioned before during the ending cutscene that we don't see. But this place exists, so the stork does have a use. So the stork's appearance is quite rare. For us to have just arrived and then the stork follow immediately after, that is not a normal experience. We were incredibly lucky. This will look better in my home. So this creature, we can only call it a creature. We don't know if it's a person or not. What does a shade look like without its skin? Is he also a similar kind of skeleton-looking thing? Could this thing have perhaps been another shade? Were they also told to not leave the caves? Did they construct this purposely without a door, so that way they would technically not be breaking the rules? And it's just a cave that extends out of the ground. Yeah, that's it, King. And perhaps the king didn't like that. Some other theories is that it's a wizard. What are they collecting bones for? That's really the big puzzle to me, is what are the bones for? What's the bone meal for? Because there are no plants. The only plants we know of is perhaps on the other side, where the old man is growing a garden. And you might remember, perhaps there was a passage that led to where that old man is. And that passage is now buried over with granite. So my theory is that this individual, this particular creature of bones, is also a shade. Perhaps this shade and the other, the one with the nose, the old man, perhaps they traveled together and they were getting bone meal and such here. However, after one of them died, the other one decided, I'm done with the caves, and sealed the entrance. And then that was the end of it. Everything else was left behind. Even the mattock. The mattock, you know, the books, a crystal in their home. This would certainly answer another puzzle. And that's in our pictures. There are some interesting titles, particularly the ones that are spelled backwards. Him and she. Well, we see an old man. What sets that off, though, is saying, well, that's probably incorrect, is that the comment the shade said when he saw this. When he saw this body, he said perhaps that was his dream to become a unicorn. But how would the shade know if it was a male or a female skeleton? In any case, it does poke a hole in the theory that this was she from the pictures. But it doesn't poke a hole in the theory that this is perhaps another shade. Granted, when we were side by side with the old man, he was taller than us. We seemed to be the size of like a child. So it is possible. And the only conclusion that I've come to about perhaps the king having control over this place and having caused it as an accident would just be because they were venturing outside in some ways, trying to bend the rules. Could have been just purely an accident. And perhaps that other shade blames the king for it. Maybe the king had no involvement. It was just nature itself. This one, it doesn't have to be a shade. It could be anything else. Granted that the old man, he's hanging out with an elderly frog woman and a tiny troll girl. It could have been some other creature. People have made theories, and they have asked the developer if their theory is correct. And the developer chooses not to answer, because symbols, they never have just one meaning. They're meaningful to each person in a different way. And who is he to take that away from them? You know, he's creating a piece of art. And the point of putting symbols is that a symbol fills the space of whatever puzzle piece you put next to it. So whatever pieces that you've put together and you put around it, the symbol will take shape to fit in that puzzle piece. And it's true not just for my puzzle pieces, but for anyone's. Perhaps the shade sees in it a dead end for what he is doing, for the way he is living. Just digging through the mines, just collecting books at home and crystals, having a hobby with birds and such, and making bone meal. What is it worth? And seeing that dead end, perhaps that inspires somebody to want to escape, to leave this place, to do something else, do something different, to not just exist here within the caves. It's possible. I perhaps should have made a bookmark up there. Now that you know what it sounds like, you knew the stairs were there, weren't you? Didn't you? We may not have any need to return here, but just to know that we have been here. Just to have it, I guess, in our little map of places we can go to. Maybe we'll want to walk back here for some reason, and instead of manually walking back, or starting some sulphur on fire, to just let the shade walk back here on his own. I am happy the stork visited when he did. Take a picture near the skeleton. And then I'll just send the shade to walk home on his own. Tomorrow, I'll take a look at all the books the shade had gathered. Also, there were a couple of other books that we'd gathered a few days ago. We didn't even review those yet. I haven't forgotten. We're a busy shade. We have a lot to do. And we have remembered. Time to walk back home. Well, it's been about an hour. I'm pretty sure the rest of the caves have aired out by now, and that when the shade returns home, they'll probably still be there. I'll make sure to double check before we start stream tomorrow, just in case. But when we get home, we'll explore some of the paintings, some of the questions we have there, and some of the answers that we now have.